everybody, and welcome to the Rupa Subramanya Show. A very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to everyone celebrating, and I hope you have a great New Year and that it starts off on a good note. And I'm really excited about 2023. I hope it's a little less crazy than 2022, to be honest with you. Now, speaking of 2022, as it winds down, I want to reflect on what I think was by far the most important news event in Canada and a very important event even in the world and this past year. And I'm of course referring to the Freedom Convoy protests, which took place right here in Ottawa, steps away from where I live. The Freedom Convoy, as you know, came to Ottawa to protest pandemic restrictions such as lockdowns, mask mandates, and vaccine mandates. It came here at the end of January and lasted for about 3 weeks till about the middle of February. And a lot of people felt that the Freedom Convoy protests brought with it a sense of hope and vitality, and especially for those who had been adversely affected by pandemic measures such as the federal vaccine mandates and the mask mandates, of course. Now, as we all know, this peaceful civil disobedience, which is what it was brutally suppressed by the Trudeau government under the guise of the Emergencies Act. Many of you will know that I reported quite extensively on the protests in real time. I was there every day, morning till late in the evening, spoke to many people over the course of those 3 weeks. And I also got to know a lot of people involved. I made a lot of friends. Some of them are very dear to me. And my guest today was literally one of the key faces of the protests and has recently come out with a book about the protests called Honking for Freedom, the Trucker Convoy That Gave Us Hope. I am talking about Benjamin Dichter, who joins me today. He really needs no introduction, but if you haven't, do check out his new book, which has a wonderful foreword by Jordan Peterson. Hi, Ben. It's great to have you on the show at long last. Welcome to the show. It's really hard to believe that it was just this past winter when we first met at that first ever press conference that you and your fellow organizers of the Freedom Convoy protests gave in the Swiss Hotel in downtown Ottawa. In many ways, I'd say that you were the face and the voice of the protests at that time. A lot has happened since then, including, I believe, some distancing between yourself and some of the other original organizers of the convoy. I wonder if you could reflect on what took place here in Ottawa and how things have evolved since then.
The only thing I would characterize differently, I don't think there's distance between myself and other members of the convoy.
Okay.
If anything, we've become closer than anything. Myself and Chad and Bridget and Chris Guerra, we've all kind of found each other. A number of the truckers who I never got the chance to meet during the convoy, we've all kind of found each other and started talking. So the exact opposite. The only thing that there's been a rift is between myself and my former legal representative that I've replaced them with. Mm-hmm. And a couple of the organizers, two of the organizers, are somewhat, in my opinion, captured by that organization. But the rest of us are all on the same team and still concerned about many of the same issues that we faced in the past. We're worried about. We want to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the frame that I look at, because I talk to them frequently, at this point. Mm-hmm. But hearkening back to the convoy itself, where do you want to start? There's so much that's gone on. I mean,
I know,
being on with Russell Brand this week, who would have thought that would happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, my life has also changed because of the protests. Yours has, I think, pretty much everybody, even for the protesters. I mean, it was, one of those events that just you never saw it. You didn't see it coming, but when it happened, it was incredible. Just one of the most incredible experiences of my life. But yeah, I mean, where do we begin? Like, I remember meeting you at the Swiss Hotel, and you were a little apprehensive about a mainstream media journalist being in the room.
No. Whoa. No, I specifically asked, maybe you don't know this. Okay. I called Anthony Fury, what's it called?
Anthony Fury, yeah, who is now with True North.
That's right. So I called him.
Yeah.
Me and Tom called him and said, listen, because I said, I want to at least try
Yeah.
to get somebody affiliated with legacy media who is credible and honest.
Mm-hmm.
So we called Anthony, and we were going through he's listing a couple of names, and then he said, you know who would be good? Rupa would
Mm-hmm.
be good. She's in Ottawa, and she's an honest actor. She's not going to,
Yeah.
promulgate a narrative if it's false.
Right.
And I said, okay, and got your email address, and I sent you an email. So I actually wanted you
That's
to be there,
right. My
right? And
bad.
at that
My
point, I think
bad.
you were writing it was for the National Post.
Yeah, yeah, I still am. I mean, I'm still a freelancer for them, but yeah, no, actually, you're absolutely right. I think I'm mixing you up with several of the other people who were at the Swiss Hotel, and they were a little apprehensive, I think, about legacy media journalists being in the room. But yes, I absolutely remember Anthony Fury emailing me and saying there's this press conference, please go to it if you can. And I'm glad I did, because I thought that was a very important event in helping set sort of this narrative, your own narrative, right? And already before the protesters that even they even came to the Capitol, you already had this establishment narrative from the mainstream media and others that these guys were a bunch of far right, nut jobs, going to pull a January 6th style insurrection and blah blah blah. And whatever you think of the January 6th thing, whether it actually, it was, if it was a nothing burger or there was something to it, I don't, it doesn't matter. The point is that there was a lot of fear mongering at that point, and I'm glad I spent that whole day walking through the protests, and then I came to the press conference, and I wanted to hear you guys, and I wanted to ask you those questions. And I remember asking you, so what do you say to people who say that this is what you're up to? And you were extremely honest.
Yeah, I mean, the legacy media at that point, from my perspective, was largely trying to ignore it. So there was only a couple of stories about it. And yeah, of course, they were trying to smear and admonish us.
Right.
It is what it is, but really didn't seem to get a lot of traction. It still didn't hit like the mainstream of legacy media. It was still kind of flying under the radar. You could tell they didn't know what to do at that point and how to deal with it. And that's why, we did that press conference, which was 2 hours and 20 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you left, me and Tamara did an hour with Rebel News. Mm-hmm. And hoping that would get, the full story out in our context. That never saw the light of day. I still don't know to this day why. Still haven't gotten an answer. But I mean, listen, the legacy media, they can say whatever they want. I can say, Justin Trudeau kills puppy dogs. That doesn't make it true, but that's what they do. And that's what they did to us. And I knew over time that if we remained peaceful, we stayed in that aura of positivity and had this community feeling about us, which we really tried to work on. That's what ended up getting the bouncy castles and the barbecues and the soup kitchens and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
There's one particular group that I always remember. This is the first group I met with after the convoy in the beginning of summer and end of spring, that sort of time. There was a group of about 100 of them from around the Brantford area. They had a barbecue, just kind of a reunion barbecue. And this was about 100 people that were helping each other because they were all parked together in Ottawa. So they were getting each other food, getting each other ice and water and stuff like that. And they were there for 3 weeks straight. And they formed very, very long and strong friendships. And it was just an honor to be invited to go and meet with some of them at one of their regular barbecues. And that's kind of the whole spirit of what the convoy was, whether it's, you look at, I often talk about that mood of the Grateful Dead concerts when I was younger, or we see a lot of this on the left from Burning Man in California. That was really, if you like Burning Man, then you would have loved Trudeau's truck stop, because it was exactly the same tone and feeling around it. It was absolutely wonderful.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. There was no escaping it. Like, I've said this many, many times. I went there looking for the bad stuff, the the Nazi flags and swastikas and racists yelling at me, but I had the opposite experience. I was quite, it was an atmosphere of love, and and it was extraordinary to experience that, as the pandemic was raging on. But Benjamin, like, I want to ask you, like, what drew you into this movement in the first place? Like, how did it all begin for you?
I mean, for me, on a personal level, it started long before then. Like, I had a business on Ryerson University's campus for many years.
Okay.
So I saw the creep of, in my interpretation, extremist postmodernism and subjectivism. I saw a change in real time over the years that my business was on campus. You could see that the student body and the faculty completely changed, like there was some sort of brain disease, or as Dr. Gad Sad calls it, the parasitic mind, that this brain disease was expanding across the faculty and the student body. Students would come in completely normal after high school. My dad was a high school teacher, by the way, so I'm not, new to high school students. And they would come in like completely normal students. And after 4 years, they would walk out extremists, subjectivists, victimization. They would have, green and yellow colored hair, and they would have subscribed to one of the many of the diversity cults, and they would just be angry and have nothing but vitriol and hatred at the world. And it got worse and worse every year. My business was we did graphics and printing, like, not books, but like graphic printing. Right. And you could see the nature of the artwork that would come in when we were first there, to how it changed over the years. So, I've been sensitive to this change because of that. I produce a podcast for Dr. Stephen Hicks, who wrote Explaining Postmodernism. It's one of the many conduits I had to Jordan Peterson was through Stephen, and got a very good understanding of the underlying philosophy that's been driving this change in universities. And now we're at the age where this disease has now infected our politics. So now all politics is run by these subjectivists. And if you understand their philosophy, the underlying philosophy, Justin Trudeau makes complete sense, and he's completely predictable, as are most of the people in the political class at this point. And this was just a natural evolution. At some point, there needed to be some sort of pushback. In 2018, Tamara and a number of others tried to have a convoy to Ottawa. They got there. Unfortunately, they got involved with one of the political parties, which always ends the movement, because of okay, now we hear you, we'll take over from now and go home. And it's a little bit of that, but more complicated to what happened. And me and Tamara decided from the very beginning, when she called me on the 15th of January, I said, we can't do what you guys did in 2015. No political parties. The only political parties we want to talk to are the ones who can drop the mandates and drop the arrive can. And she said, absolutely, that's what we're going to do. And I said, okay, great. And I was on board. I just happened to also own a truck. I'm an owner operator, and I drive, this was my salvation during the COVID years, was to be able to get out of the country and drive to the US. And I wish more Canadians could see what was going on in the United States versus Canada, because it was like coming back to a different planet. Every time I would cross the border, come back into Canada, it was a completely different world. But people who are here, who are still walking around with masks, they wouldn't have seen that. And so, yeah, it was just a natural progression.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you arrived in Ottawa, for example, did you realize that the convoy would be as momentous as it turned out to be?
Well, when Tamara first reached out to me, and I said to her, how big do you want to make this thing? And I was being a little, coy, there's no question. Yeah. And she said, well, let's make it as big as it can. I'm like, well, I mean, I can run a strategy that might work, because I know a lot of well-known people that I usually keep quiet about. And I said, but I can try. Let me see what I can do. If you want it to be big, I'll make it as big as I can. And I arrived in Ottawa. I thought, oh, well, mission accomplished, I guess. It was absolutely amazing to see just thousands of people all over the city from all different, you could tell, different political persuasions. One of the first groups of people I remember seeing, they had a peace sign with tie-dye, wearing tie-dye, like I was going to a Grateful Dead concert. It was great. And then at the same time, I took some pictures of it actually, the line of thousands of Quebecers who had been under Legault's lockdown, crossed the border on foot and came up, I've mentioned this many times, came up to Parliament Hill and just started meeting with and talking to truckers who were, many of them were from Alberta, Saskatchewan, or many of them as well were Eastern European descent. And so they have strong memories of what communism did to their families. And that's what motivated them. So it was just absolutely amazing to see how much love was in the air, and everybody was wearing Canadian flags. And it was the day after I arrived. I think it was the day after, within a couple of days. The second interview that I did, it was with an independent journalist who was working for, I think, I-24 in France. She was a Quebecer. So we did this interview and she loved it, the whole vibe about peace and love and coming together despite our differences and all that sort of stuff. And after we ended the recording, I said to her, so, now that I can ask you a question, how are you affected? And she said, I used to be a separatist until I saw the trucks coming across Canada, and I realized that we're all aligned with wanting our freedom back. And she said, I bought my first Canadian flag. I'm no longer a separatist. And that was really significant. I think of our generation growing up around the angst of, separatism and Parti Québécois, to say, here's a journalist who was fully on board with them, who just in a couple of weeks understood what it meant to be Canadian and for us to unify. It was an amazing moment.
Yeah, no, that's such an incredible story. I'm reminded of this time when the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said that Canada was a post-national state and there are no real identities and whatnot, and we're all just doing our own thing. But I think he was proven wrong, and I've written about this during the protests. He was absolutely proven wrong on this, because pretty much everybody I met and spoke to had a strong sense of who they were and why they were there. And I was the opposite, as you say, and as and I've said this, and many others have noted this as well. The protest brought the country together in a way that hadn't happened for a very, very long time.
Well, I would like to quote Prime Minister Blackface Trudeau in saying, quote, I am not the intellectual my father was, end quote. And that's one of the true statements he's made in his life. He is, and not that I'm a huge supporter of Pierre Trudeau, but even he was a gigantic intellectual compared to Junior.
Yeah, we'll get to Justin Trudeau in a bit, because on this actually, and his performance at the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act just in a little bit. But just going back to those early days of the protests, one of my recollections from that time was that in the midst of all of this chaos and confusion, I always noticed that your messaging was always very consistent. It was about peace, love, unity. Distance yourselves from those who, come here for other reasons, and you always maintained calm and composure throughout that time. How did you manage to do that when there were so many moving parts and so much uncertainty about what the authorities would do?
I'm just a naturally pretty positive person, and I don't let things rattle me. I quite enjoy conflict when people try to bring conflict to me. Like, okay, game on. Like, it doesn't really bother me. I don't let my emotions. I'll get a little bit feisty in my conversations, but I don't actually get upset. And in fact, there were many times throughout the protests where Tamara didn't have a handler. I put a little bit of a moat around myself in that I went to the media room, which is my hotel room and my suite, with my team, and focused on anything, send it to me through Tamara or some of the other organizers that we appointed. because I'm already dealing with 10,000 messages an hour on Twitter and online. I need to have some sort of whatever. But Tamara, and I suggested to her, let's get you a handler, but she didn't want to because she's a very personal person. She's a very one-on-one communicator, and I can understand how that made her uncomfortable. But many times she'd come to my room and she'd be like, oh, I just need to relax. I'm going for a cigarette. And then she'd come, she's like, can I have a hug? Let's have a hug, relax, calm each other down. Because at the end of the day, and maybe because I've lived in some very dangerous countries, and when you live in a neighborhood where you don't know if your neighbor is narcotraficante or they're paramilitary, you learn that there's certain things to really be worried about. And I didn't think this was one. I thought, and the fact that I saw everybody had abandoned the temptation to go into a state of anxiety and anger and came on board with peace and love. Once I saw Chief Slowly, in fact, on February 3rd, when he made the statement to, I think it was one of the Toronto news stations or whatever it was, he said, they've been peaceful. This requires a political solution, not a policing solution. I thought, yes, they got it. They know we're here. We're peaceful. We're not here to be adversarial towards the police or even the government, just the policy that we need to change of. That gave me a lot of hope. And despite the certain ramblings from people trying to get us all worried and say, oh, the police are going to raid tonight. You know how many times I said, the police are not going to raid. Just chill, relax, just relax. They're not going to raid. And so I just tend to maintain my composure under pressure. That's just how I am.
Well, yeah, no, it was extraordinary. I would, that would have just really, I would have had a nervous breakdown if I were,
No.
if I had been in your shoes. But I mean, it was so incredibly, so much going on. The whole 3 weeks, it just got more and more intense, I think, as time went on. But tell me, I mean, how do you think things have evolved since then? Are you satisfied with how things played out?
I think so. I think I've had the advantage of, since the convoy, having to travel down south, both to, I spoke at Bitcoin Miami, and then I went down to South America to visit friends who I used to live with, to relearn how to walk, which was fun. Going in a wheelchair to Latin America isn't exactly the night, and it isn't exactly the March of Dimes, if you know what I mean. But so I got to see the effects, not just within Canada, but outside of Canada. And I think amongst the international political community, it's pretty much understood that Justin Trudeau is just a lame duck leader. He has zero legitimacy at this point. And most Canadians, I think, are counting the days until he's out of office, right? I also, I mentioned on, I think it was on Russell Brand, I mentioned that my friends in Colombia who know nothing about Canadian politics, and I really don't get into politics when I'm down there, they used to say, oh yeah, Justin Trudeau is a young leader and he's so handsome and so smart. And now they call him Cara Negra Fidelito, which means blackface little Fidel. And it's not because of anything I told them. It's because they all saw what he did in front of the entire world. And the interim chief, Police Bell, has got to be the least employable person in law enforcement that still holds, I don't understand how he holds a job. He single-handedly destroyed the reputation of policing around the world. I even said in a couple of interviews, I think it was on Newsmax or GB News, I said, this is the opportunity for the police force to push back against all the defund police nonsense and to show that they are good community advocates and they will work within the community. Here's their opportunity. And Steve Bell took that and flushed it down the toilet in front of the entire world. So the incompetence is not just limited to Justin Trudeau. There's plenty of it to spread all over the world, right? So I think that's such, and then also the fact that, remember, we had just head into hard lockdowns in Ontario. There were mask mandates. If you remember when we arrived in Ottawa, it was the first time people weren't wearing masks in large crowds within Canada. And look how quickly that was reversed. All of a sudden, the fears of COVID and the super spreaders, and it's amazing how that's all gone now, just immediately.
Yeah, because we're following the science, right? So
That's right.
Um,
Trust the science is a religious statement. It's not a
yeah,
scientific
yeah.
statement.
No, I know. To be honest with you, at one point I couldn't tell. I don't know if you know this. One of my favorite Twitter handles out there called Ottawa Gestapo, and
Yes, yes, I do. I actually know him quite well.
I couldn't tell the difference between what Ottawa Gestapo was tweeting and what Ottawa police were tweeting. It was like almost identical.
It's brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely
no,
brilliant.
yeah, it was crazy. I couldn't believe the police picked a side. Let's face it, they picked the side of the residents in a sense. I mean, they shouldn't be picking sides for one thing. The law and order should be, that's their concern. But when I say they picked a side, I'm saying that they Chief Bell was using the same language as the people who opposed the protest, right? Like calling
Words
it
are
an
violence.
occupation. Yeah, calling it an occupation, and the language was incredibly charged, and of course he repeated the same talking points about violence and this and that, and of course we know through the hearings none of that could be proven. There was really no evidence of it. They were just hearing about these things from people. These were not actually substantiated in any way. But yeah, go ahead.
I was
Sorry.
gonna, just to tell you what I think in addition to that, like I have a
Yeah.
brother who's in policing. He was very close to retirement, and a couple of nephews that are in policing. So, and I have a bunch of friends who are cops who I was messaging with during the convoy. So it's just wild to ask them, what do you think they're doing now? Tell me what you think they're doing. And they're like, yeah, they're a bunch of, I mean, they all knew Slowly from Metro, and they think they don't like him. They don't like Bell. Like, I got all the kind of drama behind the scenes, what's happening in policing.
Yeah.
But the problem is we have this politicization of our police force, and you saw it in real time in Ottawa. That's what these local police service boards are. They need to be abandoned. They need to be destroyed, because the immunity leftist activists are the ones who hire the police chiefs. So then it becomes an entire politicized process. And I would argue you even saw that in the commission, because what did you see? You saw what's his name? Pat Morris, sorry, who is head of the OPP intelligence, which is the largest intelligence bureau in all of Canada, is OPP intelligence, from what I understand.
Yeah, he was.
And
one
what
of
did
my
he say?
favorite
He's been on the.
Yeah.
That's right, and he's been on the
Yeah.
force for 36 years.
Yeah.
So he's getting close to retirement. He's like my brother, saying, you know what, now I'm going to say whatever I want. And what did he say? He said the truth. He said the lack of violence was shocking, something he'd never seen in all his years of policing. But on the other side, you see the politicized police, people in policing and law enforcement who are applying for jobs in real time during the commission. For me, it was disgusting, because I know the talking points that police officers are supposed to say to get promoted in policing now. And that's what you heard from Bell and all the others. So the younger ones were jockeying, and Slowly as well, clearly wants to be back in law enforcement or maybe politics. They were applying for jobs, but the few guys that were close to retirement, that's where you heard some honesty. And I think that's what was happening within policing during the convoy as well. So it's not that they were choosing the residents. No, they were choosing their political careers or opportunities in policing over their job of community policing and protecting people, because their job as a police officer, the primary thing is they're supposed to de-escalate. That's it. But the government, on every opportunity, the federal government, provincial and municipal government, escalated at every opportunity. It was quite disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important distinction, an interesting distinction that you make, that there was a difference between people who are trying to still, climb up the ladder as far as their career was concerned, versus people who were close to retirement, and the latter was more inclined to speak the truth than the former. Let's go to the Emergencies Act. What did you see it coming? Did you see that? Did you anticipate the Trudeau government, first of all, using the Emergencies Act to break up the protests? And did you also see the freezing of bank accounts of some of the protesters?
No, it was interesting, a little concerning during some of the testimony when people were saying that, oh, we knew the Emergency Measures Act was going to come in. Like, excuse me, perhaps you forget being there. We were all shocked. They're like, what? Wait. He's trying to do what his dad did? Come on. He can't be serious. Like, we were blown away.
Yeah.
Nobody thought, because he had so many different things that he could have done first. Like, first, you know what they could have done? Could have talked to us. They just could have come out. Like, how many times through Tamara Leach's account, I invited Jerry Butts to come for coffee, and it was genuine. I said, we're not going to attack you. Come just talk to us. Just, be amongst us. Say hello. That's it. We'll have coffee. Let's, you know what I mean? But no, they didn't even have the courage to come for coffee. These are the hashtag leadership class, right? So they didn't look to have any mediators to reach out to us. They did nothing, because most of the government, as I suspected, and I think we saw this in the commission, most layers of government were doing this. It's his fault, right? It's all like, no, that's Ottawa Police. No, that's the PLT. No, it's the federal government. No, everybody was doing this, taking zero responsibility, which is what bureaucracy does. That's why I'm a small government guy, by the way. And I knew during it that this is probably what's going to go on. Just give it some time until they figure out who ultimately is going to be assigned responsibility to deal with us, and then we'll deal with them. And that's it. And it'll be great. We'll figure something out. But it was shocking that they would go from trying to figure out who has to do what to implementing this, for the Americans watching, Canada's version of martial law for some parking infractions. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about trucks that were parked illegally, or at least in violation of a bylaw, but there were still so many laneways for emergency vehicles. Like, you walked around, you saw a couple of the streets, Wellington was particularly busy, but there were always a laneway in all the other subsequent streets. I have pictures from in front of the Arc Hotel, from Tamara's hotel room, actually. I took a picture from downstairs, and what do you see? You see a couple of big rigs parked in the Green Pea parking and two open laneways, and that was 2 streets away from Wellington. That was where the Arc Hotel is. But this fake narrative, like all our media is all fake PR press releases at this point, trying to promulgate this fiction and sell it to people. Like, use your eyes. She'll show you the pictures and the videos. And luckily you were there and you witnessed it in real time. And I'm glad you were.